Alright, time to start the lesson about intervals where the functions are positive and negative. So we're going to start with this little starter thing. It's about the flight and journey of this submarine that goes underwater and flies in the air. I wanted to do one that went above and below because this is about intervals where it's positive and negative, which means above the x-axis versus below the x-axis, or positive y values, positive function values, and negative y values, or negative function values. So here, what does an elevation of 0 mean? That's going to be at the surface of the water. Just put surface, right? Because this function is about a submarine going up and down, above and below the water. What's the deepest the submarine goes? Well, it looks like here. Try to draw my line over so my correctly. -7. And if we look at our scale here, it says hundreds of feet. So that's going to be -700 feet. And then these are kind of like the lesson part of this. During what time periods was the submarine underwater? Well, here at the beginning, it looks like it's at the surface of the water. And here to here, and during this section, is below the water. So I'm going to write down between 2 and 7. What's this, minutes? Minutes. 2 to 7 minutes. And then looks like it's going up above the water, and then here it hits again. So from this point until this is all underwater to here, looks like it's going to be underwater during this section. So that's between 14 and 20 minutes. So there's that. And the next one's asking, during what time periods was the submarine above the water? Well, we already went over that section. It started being above the water here, and then it hit again right here. So it's between these points here, 7 and 14. 7 to 14 minutes. Awesome. So if you got those, you pretty much got the idea behind between positive and negative. Positive means above the water. If you think of your x-axis as the water, that's above the water. And then negative means below the water, or below the x-axis. So if I was writing the intervals where this function was positive, instead of writing 2-7, I write 2, 7 with my interval notation. And then also 14 to 20 minutes using interval notation. And then if I was asking where was it above the water? It was below during those two, and then above in this middle section, and that was the 7 to 14 minute interval. So if you're able to kind of identify those, this lesson is really easy. Just write down the intervals from this x to this x, the function is positive, or from this x to this x, the function is negative. And so we're gonna look at the notes again. You should have these ones squared away already, writing down positive and negative. Writing down domain and range. But the intervals where it's positive versus interval it's negative, let's check on a few of these. My first function here, this line, well, it's positive until it hits the x-axis. So if you want to think of x-axis as the ground, you can think of that. Well, this line comes screeching down and blam, right there it hits. Well, before that, it was positive, so that's from -infinity to -4, that x value right there. And so that's what I'm going to write for my interval. After that, from -4 onward to the right, it is all negative, meaning below the x-axis. So that's the interval where it's negative. And then I can look at my second graph, my B graph here. If I highlight my x-axis, it is below my x-axis during this section, which was from -infinity, and then it hit right here at 2. At 2 is when it stops being negative. So you can see my interval there from -infinity to 2. And then from 2 to the right, everywhere to the right of 2, once again you think of x as time. So from 2 minutes in the future onward forever to the end of time, it's all positive. And so that's my interval, 2 to infinity. C is interesting. It actually has multiple sections where it's positive. Right here it's positive, and then it goes down, 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 and then right here, since it hits at 0, 0 is not positive. It is 0. It is neutral. And so my interval actually stops there. It starts here at -2 and ends at 0. That's my first one. And then my second one, after you get past 0, it is positive forever and ever to the right. And so I'm going to put 0 to positive infinity. So that one's kind of tricky because of this middle point. But just remember, at 0, it's not positive. So if you got that going on, you make sure you end your interval. And there you go. So let's look at a few examples. Again, grab a scratch paper, see if you can practice this out. See if you can write down the intervals where it's positive and negative. So I'm going to show you a function, write down where it's positive, write down where it's negative, and we'll test this out. First one, where is it positive? Where is it negative? Pause the video and try it. If we're positive, you put -infinity to 4. Congratulations, you got it figured out. Yeah, this is all positive, meaning positive y values, until it hits the x-axis. You can think of your x-axis as the ground or water. And after that, from 4 onward to the right, forever, it is all negative. And let's try out another one. Well, let's do something like this. Write down where it's positive and negative. Pause the video. Do that. Alright, if you, for positive, put -infinity to 2, congratulations. And then it was, sorry, that is not it. Sorry, my bad. It was negative from -infinity to 2, meaning below my x-axis, everywhere to the left of this point, 2. So -infinity to 2. And then it was positive thereafter, meaning above the x-axis, from the x value of 2 onward to the right. So that's where it's positive, negative. Let's jump to some challenging ones. Ooh, okay, we're going to do this one. Where's this one? Positive versus negative. Pause the video, try it out. Alright, this one's a little tricky. It is actually never negative, and it's positive everywhere. So if you remember when we were graphing exponentials, things like 2 to the x power, even though as you get over here it gets closer and closer and closer and closer, it never actually hits the x-axis, and it never crosses. And so this is actually positive everywhere because it never reaches 0. You can do 2 to the -1 billionth power, and it would still be a positive y value there. It's just really, 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 really small. So, let's jump to some other ones. Write down where this one is positive, write down where it's negative, just to kind of test yourself on a little bit harder function. Pause and do that. Alright, so I'm actually going to start with the negative part. So it's negative in this section, which is between this x value and this x value, which those are -1 and 7. And then it's positive outside that, so it's positive to the left of this number and positive to the right of that one. So I actually have 2 intervals where it's positive, so I'm going to write them both. From -infinity to -1, that's this section, to the left of x value of -1, and then to the right of 7, so 7 to the right of x values there. And my answer does need to get a u in there, and you can put it here, or you can put it after this one. And that's to show that both of those are part of the answer. Remember, if you have 2 intervals or 3 intervals, you put u's between them to unify them together. Well, let's jump to some that are on your assignment, so you can kind of practice on these ones. Take a moment to do number 1 and 2, and we'll have pause the video, and we'll have you check in a moment. Alright, let's have you check. So number 1 here, you got this line that starts out underground or underwater from the dawn of time, and then right here it crosses. That's right at 6, and then after that it is positive. So when I write down my intervals here, it is positive from 6 to the right, 6 to infinity, and it was negative from -infinity to 6. So there's my intervals. And let's mention the range and x-intercept. X-intercept's pretty easy. It's just where it hits the x-axis. The range is the y values. Hopefully you remember that. Those are the y's. What's the highest and lowest this function goes? Well, you do lowest first. So what's the lowest y value, comma, what's the highest y value? And this one goes down forever, so that's my lowest y value of -infinity. and it goes up forever, positive infinity. Number 2, we actually looked at something like this earlier. It is positive everywhere for the same reasons we looked at earlier, and it's negative nowhere. It's always up above the x-axis, which means it has no x-intercept, so that's kind of tricky. Sometimes there's not one. But let's talk about range again. Once again, range is wise, and this function does go up forever, so there's the positive infinity part of it. And this one keeps going down and down and down and down, but it never actually hits 0. So why do I have a 0 here? It's because that's what it's approaching. It keeps getting closer and closer and closer and keeps trying to get to 0, but never reaches it. And so that's why I have an open bracket, that parenthesis there, because it never actually reaches it, but it does get infinitely close to it. So, now that we've done that, we're going to do one last example. Go ahead and pause the video, see if you can get all of these written out, and we'll have you check in a moment. Right, let's have you check and see how you did. Let's start with range. Range is the lowest and highest it goes. We're assuming that since I hit the edge, it's going to keep going. So yeah, this is going to go down forever. So the lowest y value is negative infinity. And on the right side, it's going up forever. So my range is going to go up to positive infinity. The x-intercepts, this has 3, negative 2, 0, 0, 0, and 3, 0. And those are actually very important parts for the next part. Positive and negative. Let's start with positive. Positive means above the x-axis, or above the ground here. You got this section, which ranges between negative 2 and 0. And then you got this section, which starts at 3 and continues on to the right forever. So those are my intervals there, negative 2, 0, and then 3 to infinity. And the next part is, where is it negative? Well, it actually starts negative, this section. It was negative from the dawn of time until 2 minutes ago, at which point it went positive. So there's my first interval, from negative infinity to negative 2. And then in this section, from 0 minutes to 3 minutes, it is all negative. So I put 0, 3 for my second negative interval. And I want to mention that these have u's because there's multiple intervals. And you have to tie them together in your answer. So there you go. Good luck on the rest of these. It just takes practice. Practice, practice, practice. Check your answers as they go along and make sure you're getting them right. Good luck.